Hi, everyone. Welcome to the State Department. Do you see those two junior reporters in the back? Those are my kids. Hi, boys. Welcome to Mommy's new job. So that means you all have try to be a little bit nice today, or at least keep it clean. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. I know we've got a lot to get to today.
Blatant play.
No, I wish. This morning, Secretary Tillerson released the 17th installment of the Trafficking in Persons Report, also known as the TIP Report. To go into greater detail about that report today, we have with us Susan Coppage, who's the Ambassador at Large to monitor and combat trafficking in persons. She'll join us in just a second. Ambassador Coppage will deliver remarks and then take a few of your questions. If you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand, let her know which outlet you're with, since she isn't here for you every day, and she can take your questions. So if you do have any questions about the TIP report, please do ask those questions of her now so that she can best address them. When she's finished, then I'll take over and answer your questions about other matters at that time. So with that, I'll hand it over to Ambassador Coppage. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Oh, let me move this way so you don't have to.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Although I've lost all track of time today, it's been quite busy. Thank you, Heather. Thank you very much. This morning, Secretary Tillerson released the 2017 Trafficking in Persons Report, a reflection of global leadership on this key human rights issue and our principal diagnostic tool to assess government efforts across the 3 Ps of prosecution, protection, and prevention. The TIP report is also a symbol of our moral and legal obligation to combat human trafficking and is in keeping with our country's historical commitment to advancing human dignity and freedom around the world. This year's TIP report, I brought a copy, I'm sure you'll all want one, emphasizes that governments must do everything in their power to hold traffickers accountable, from passing and enforcing tough anti-trafficking laws to prosecuting complicit officials who betray the public trust and profit from the suffering of others. As the Secretary said this morning, the complicity and corruption that facilitates human trafficking must end. Justice must be served both to deter potential traffickers, but also to restore the dignity of survivors. To accomplish this, governments need to speed up the delivery of justice while respecting due process, impose adequate terms of imprisonment commensurate with the heinous nature of the crime, and prosecute all criminally culpable parties and intermediaries. Trafficking in persons is a hidden crime rooted in deception. Victims are coerced or intimidated into silence, and they often fear that if they do come forward, they will be punished. When governments enact and enforce strong, comprehensive anti-trafficking laws, they send an unmistakable message to criminals. We will not tolerate this. Traffickers, not their victims, should and will face punishment. This morning, the Secretary highlighted some positive examples of government action to hold human traffickers accountable, and we commend these and other governments that take up difficult cases and prosecute them to the end. But with more than 20 million estimated trafficking victims globally, prosecutions are still inadequate given the scale of the problem, and we all have more work to do. Here are a few quick statistics from this year's report. Of the 187 countries assessed under the minimum standards, 36 countries were placed on Tier 1, 80 on Tier 2, 45 were placed on the Tier 2 watch list, and 23 countries were on Tier 3. In all, there were 21 downgrades, meaning a country moved down a level, and 27 upgrades. But no matter the tier, every country, even those on Tier 1, should do more to combat trafficking. Tier 1 countries only meet the minimum standards to address trafficking, which is why the TIP report offers recommendations for Tier 1 countries as well as others. A key concern for many countries is a failure to impose sentences for traffickers that are sufficient to deter the criminal activity or reflect the nature of the crime. We still see instances of government officials protecting brothels, taking bribes from traffickers, and obstructing investigations for profit. And while we still see governments criminalize and penalize victims for crimes their traffickers force them to commit. This is why we continue to use the Trafficking in Persons report as an instrument in diplomacy, a means to effect global change and motivate tangible progress around the world. We hope it will continue to prompt foreign governments to enact legislation establish national action plans, and implement meaningful anti-trafficking policies and programs. I am very proud of this report, and I am happy to take any questions you might have. Yes.
Wanted to ask about the Child Soldiers Prevention Act list. So Iraq and Burma were taken off the list this year, and Human Rights Watch put out a statement about an hour ago saying that even as of last week, there were children that were part of Burma's armed forces, and in Iraq, children have died fighting the Islamic State along with Iraqi government units. Meaning that both of those governments are still complicit in the use of child soldiers. I'm just wondering, what is the reasoning for taking those countries off the list?
So the State Department will continue to monitor and report on the recruitment and use of child soldiers, and will continue to engage the governments of Iraq and Burma on this issue. And in the report narrative, for example, for Iraq, we recognize that children remain highly vulnerable to forcible recruitment and use by armed groups, including ISIS, the Popular Mobilization Forces, or PMF, tribal forces, and the Kurdistan Workers' Party. We are also concerned as well in the trafficking report about what happens to those children when they are recovered, and make sure that governments continue to provide services for those individuals when they are released from military forces. Similarly, with respect to Burma, we continue to remain concerned that government's response to past instances of child soldiering. The government has punished some military officers who engaged in the unlawful recruitment of child soldiers, but these punishments were not sufficiently stringent. They were more administrative than they were criminal sanctions. And I was able to directly raise this point with the government officials while traveling to Burma in December. The 2017 report urges the Burmese government to cease official involvement in compelling civilians to perform any type of forced labor, to reform the military self-reliance policy and others that drive the demand for forced labor, and to look at child soldier conscription. And then again, to when children are removed from the military, to work on reintegrating them into society. So the narratives for those countries accurately and factually report what happened in those countries during the reporting period, which ended March 30th of 2017.
But do you see any improvement? I mean, what's the justification for then removing, if there are all these continued concerns, what's justification for removing them from that list?
So we look at various factors under the minimum standards when determining a tier ranking for those countries, and that analysis is reflected in the report. So certainly for these countries, we talk about areas where improvements need to be made, but Burma has made significant strides in removing children from military service. Yes, ma'am.
Thanks. China obviously responded with some displeasure, calling it irresponsible. So what effect do you expect this to have on working with China on North Korea, and is it possible that it might actually have the opposite effect?
Well, we hope to continue working with all governments that are ranked in the report, and sometimes there is initial displeasure with that ranking. However, the report is seen worldwide as a real factual and accurate analysis of what's going on in countries such as China. And there are recommendations for China, as there are for other ranked countries, Tier 2 and Tier 2 watch list as well. And so all countries have recommendations, including the United States. We certainly look at ourselves as well and talk about areas where progress can be made, and hope to continue those good working relationships diplomatically.
What expectation do you have that this will be a positive pressure that will spur them to act in the way that the U.S. wants them to do towards North Korea?
So the Trafficking Victim Protection Act sets out these minimum standards and the analysis that the officials in the State Department are to use. And this is done by people in the field at our embassies as well as here. So we don't consider whether it's going to be positive or negative. We want to be truthful and accurate, and we certainly hope to continue our diplomatic engagement. Historically, we have heard that this report does make a difference. When I travel, I meet with senior government officials who want to do more to address this issue and want to do more to improve their ranking. And so I hope that internal pressure on a country, as well as diplomatic pressure from other nations, will continue to be an impetus for change.
Can I ask a question on tip the edge for China, because it's been on the 2 watch list for a while, and according to reports there was some pressure other years to put it down to 3. Was it the North Korean forced labor? Because that's what Secretary Tillerson decided to emphasize in his remarks.
Secretary Tillerson did highlight the concerns with forced labor with respect to North Korea, but there are other forced labor concerns in China as well. There have been NGO reports that indicate there's still government complicity with respect to drug rehabilitation facilities where individuals continue to be detained without judicial process. Human rights organizations and media continue to report that local officials in Western China coerced Uyghur men and women to participate in forced labor outside that province there. And then despite the local government issuing a decree in early 2017, that practice has not ceased. Last, international media and the ILO report that children in some work-study programs supported by local governments and schools are forced to work in factories. So forced labor in China is not one-dimensional.
One more on China. I'm Felicia Schwartz with the Wall Street Journal.
Thank you.
So in terms of, just to follow up on Barbara's question, in terms of one thing tipping the scale, I guess you listed several things that are concerned, but did one of them tip the scale? And then in general, was downgrading China part of a broader strategy on China, or is this just happening in the context of this relationship without a connection?
So it's hard to say that any one thing for any one country will tip the scale because there are so many minimum standards we look at. We look at whether the law is comprehensive. In China, for children under 18, it appears that the Chinese law does not require, or does require, force, fraud, and coercion, which is an international standard for those over 18. Children under 18 who are placed in sex trafficking should automatically be viewed as victims because they are not consenting based on their age. So there's a concern about the law there. There's a concern about victim services in China as well, that once individuals are identified, they're not screened for trafficking indicators, they aren't provided the services they need, and they aren't assisted with reintegration into society. So there are many factors that go into any country's ultimate tier ranking.
Question on child the broader relationship about downgrading China this year to pressure
So
them
the
in any
minimum
way?
standards that are in the law don't really allow for consideration of strategic relationships or other factors. Yes.
On child bride, my name is Saeed Erekat from Al Quds Daily newspaper, about child brides, especially Syrian refugees on the side of the Jordan border, and the Zaatari camp in particular, and in Lebanon as well, where girls as young as 13 and 14 are married off to wealthy middle-aged men from the Gulf region and so on, and it seems to be sanctioned by both the Jordanian government or the Lebanese government and the clerics. I wonder what you're doing about that.
Certainly, if there's certainly if there are instances of sex trafficking with respect to forced marriage, that is recounted in the report. Forced marriage is one of those truly horrible issues that may not, however, always be trafficking. It can be that you're forced into marriage without the continued exploitation via force, fraud, and coercion. But we do look at forced marriage as a component of sex trafficking in cases where it's indicated. Yes, ma'am.
Al Jazeera English. What will be the real-world impact of China being put in this tier? Will the sanctions, cultural programs, how will we see an impact?
So there are restrictions that can come with the Tier 3 ranking. We have a 90-day process to put that into place, and the White House makes the final determination on those restrictions. So we don't yet know.
Are you aware of any time that sanctions have been imposed, that a president has imposed sanctions on a country for being in Tier 3?
I've been in the office for 2 years, and last year there were partial restrictions that were imposed, is my understanding. I can't recall right now. We can get back to you on that.
With the Washington Post, some of the human rights groups have said that some of the current policies, such as putting an end to sanctuary cities, might make it more difficult for the U.S. to remain on Tier 1 next year. I'm just pulling that one out, just to be straightforward about it. Is that a realistic possibility that something like ending sanctuary cities could cause the U.S. ranking to take a hit?
So one of the vulnerabilities that the report addresses worldwide is individuals who are in a country unlawfully and may not have access to documentation or lawful work. That then makes them more vulnerable to traffickers who can then impose upon them work requirements that could lead to forced labor and labor trafficking. And so it certainly is a concern globally how to address and how to screen for indicators among those who might not be in a country lawfully to see if they are in fact victims of trafficking. And here in the U.S., if that is found to be the case, that someone is here unlawfully but is a victim of trafficking, they are allowed to apply for a T visa, and that T visa allows them to stay and work with the prosecution in their case and to move forward. And one of the messages while I have been in this office has been that we really need to focus on not criminalizing victims who are committing crimes due to the situation of being trafficked. For example, the trafficker brings them across the border, or the trafficker puts them into employment, or the trafficker puts them into prostitution. These are crimes in this country, but the victim is not the one perpetrating the crime, it's the trafficker.
This may be a question for DHS, but if you've been deported, how do you apply for a T visa?
You can still apply for a T visa with the Department of Homeland Security. In fact, I had a victim in a trafficking case who was back in Central America, and we needed to bring her here to testify, and she received a T visa for
Who
that.
had been deported for
She
being
had been
here
deported.
illegally?
Yes,
And she
Yes, ma'am.
has come back and testified?
she did. She was able to obtain a T visa from abroad. Yes, ma'am.
So last year, China actually was given a waiver to stay on the Tier 2 watch list. Can you speak a little bit to whether that was considered in this particular year, or kind of generally speaking, how the department considers whether or not to issue a waiver?
Sure. So for 2 years, a country can be on the watch list without a waiver. And then for 2 years, a waiver is required to remain on the watch list. And to be eligible for that waiver, a country must submit a national action plan that, if it were fully funded, would lead towards significant efforts to eliminate trafficking. So that decision is made every year that a country needs that waiver. So it didn't impact this year's decision. We analyzed the minimum standards and made a determination that China was not making significant efforts and therefore belonged on Tier 3.
Did they issue an action plan or send you an action plan, China specifically?
I don't recall.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
The ambassador has time for.
Thank y'all. Good, I'll
She's a busy day today. Thank you so much. Good to see you. Okay. And if anyone has any additional follow-up questions regarding the TIP report, we can try to collect those and get back with you more information. Good afternoon again. I want to start with a little bit about the Indian Prime Minister and the visit here yesterday. The Indian Prime Minister Modi departed Washington last night after a successful trip to Washington. He went to the White House, as you all know, at the invitation of President Trump. The president said yesterday, quote, "The relationship between India and the United States has never been stronger and has never been better." Secretary Tillerson met with Prime Minister Modi yesterday morning. The two talked about ways to further strengthen our cooperation, particularly in the areas of counterterrorism, defense, and also trade. The Secretary reaffirmed the administration's support for India's role as a leading security provider in the Indo-Pacific region. He also noted that he looks forward to working even more closely with India on shared regional and global priorities, including North Korea. So we thank Prime Minister Modi for coming to Washington. With that, I'll take your questions.
Thank you. Let's start with the Supreme Court order from yesterday.
Okay.
I realize that you have 72 hours to actually implement it, and we're only just a little over 24 hours into it. And so I presume that people are still working on it.
Good math for a reporter.
Implementation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I couldn't subtract. I couldn't tell you how much. I don't know how many hours are left. But what is your understanding of is the department going to set out a list of criteria for what constitutes a bona fide relationship with an American entity or person, as the court has said?
So a lot of talk and a lot of questions about this term bona fide, and that was something that actually came from the Supreme Court. So as you correctly mentioned, we have a couple days still to work this out and get more information. So we will be looking to the Department of Justice to get more clarification on what a bona fide relationship will be.
Right, but do you expect that you will lay at this, that you, in your guidance to visa issuing posts, will be laying out, okay, like a second cousin twice removed is not bona fide, or is bona fide?
Right.
Or, a hotel reservation
I would
is a bona fide
anticipate that we would have to give certainly some degree of explanation and a definition to our folks who are handling this overseas. Exactly what that terminology will look like, that we don't know yet, so that's why we'll continue to chat with the Department of Justice and our folks over there. People here are hard at work with Department of Justice and also, I believe, Homeland Security to try to figure out exactly what this term bona fide should mean and will mean, and then we'll get that information out to our folks across the world.
And do you have any idea of the time? I mean, I realize you have until Thursday,
Yeah.
but could it come earlier? I mean,
This is obviously an important matter and a big matter, and everybody wants to get this right. They want to see this implemented in an orderly fashion. And so in doing that, I think they'll probably take their time, as much time as they have, to make sure they get it right so that we can get that information and then get that out to our folks overseas. And we know that our people at the State Department have a lot of questions about this as well. Legitimate questions, just as all of you do too.
So who's
I mean, at the point of entry, how is it enforced? Because the first time around, it caused a great deal of chaos, if you remember. Now, how is it going to be enforced? Is it left to the discretion of the customs officer or the immigration officer
Yeah.
at the point of entry?
I think some of that we just don't know yet. We need additional guidance from the Department of Justice. So some of these questions, important questions that you all have, I'm just not going to be able to answer today because this is all still in flux and the lawyers are going through it. And you know, lawyers get involved and they like to go through all the language and all the words. So some of that I'm just going to have to wait until they can give us greater guidance on that. Hi, Felicia. Hi.
Thanks.
And let's stay on this, on the
then-
executive order before we
Okay,
go
then
over to other
come back to
things.
me later.
Okay. Hi, Michelle.
I don't know how, what the scope is of what you do know, but in terms of refugees coming in and this relationship, if they've had contact with a resettlement agency or a church group or something, are you prepared to treat that as a bona fide relationship? Like, or is that one of the things you haven't hashed out yet?
So a couple things. Bona fide relationship, we don't have a definition here at the State Department for that yet. None of the agencies has that definition just yet. That we will be working to get. That I anticipate will take a couple days to get that. However, I can tell you in terms of refugees who are already slated to be coming here, we have been in touch with them. By that I mean we have advised our refugee resettlement partners overseas that they should currently proceed with the resettlement of refugees who are scheduled to travel to the United States through July the 6th. Beyond July the 6th, we are not totally certain how that will work because, again, this is in flux, this is in progress, this is a new development, as the Supreme Court just spoke to this yesterday. There is a number of 50,000, as you all know, that is the 50,000 cap. We expect to reach that cap within the next week or so. We are somewhere in the neighborhood of close to 49,000. Not exactly 49,000, but something close to that. So
You know that the ruling addresses that cap and says that it, for certain people with that relationship, it would go beyond. the
correct.
50,000.
So refugees with bona fide ties, which we're still working on that definition, will not be subject to that cap. But I just wanted to mention that and lay that out about the 50,000 arrivals. Okay.
I believe the number, I think you have hit 49,000, just in the last 2 hours.
In the last couple, okay, good, Matt. Okay, hi, how are you?
When you do define sort of what a bona fide relationship is that something?
Again, that won't be our definition. We'll be working with the Department of Justice. They'll make that designation and determination, and then we'll follow through with it.
Sure. In terms of informing the consular officers, that of course we expect that to happen. But in terms of also publicizing to potential immigrants, people who are applying for visas, is that something that you plan to make public so that they don't kind of spend the money or whatever it might be to
Yeah.
make the application?
One thing I think that the State Department is good at doing is putting up lots of stuff on the website, but also just getting information out to the general public. We want travelers or prospective travelers to know exactly what they may or may not be facing, so we'll get that information out.
So does the State Department share the concerns of 3 justices that this could be a burden and a problem for the State Department?
I'm not aware of that. Okay, anything else on this matter? Lori, do you have something on the EO? We're done with EO. Okay, let's go on to something else then. Okay.
Qatar?
Sure, let's go on to Syria.
So the Russians put out a readout of a call yesterday between Secretary Tillerson and Foreign Minister Lavrov. In the Russian version of the call, it says that they discussed deterring the use of chemical weapons. Did the
They
Secretary
discussed the what?
deterring the use of chemical weapons
Okay.
in Syria? Did the Secretary share the information that was shared with us last night that the U.S. has detected preparations at the site, and did the Secretary warn Foreign Minister Lavrov about that, or ask them to press the Syrians not to do that?
Well, I can confirm that Secretary Tillerson spoke yesterday with his counterpart, with Mr. Lavrov, the foreign minister there. As you know, they talk about things regularly. They began their dialogue in Moscow in, I believe it was March. They met here about a month ago or so, and then, of course, they've had subsequent phone conversations, such as the one last evening. Secretary Tillerson is not putting out a full play-by-play of that conversation. We know that the Russians have put out what they consider to be their version, so I'm not going to get into a tit-for-tat about what we think they said or what they claim they said, claim was said in that conversation, but the Secretary has made his concerns clear in the past and continues to do so with regard to Russia.
In light of the statement that the White House put out last night, seems like a fair question to ask.
Oh, I'm not, you can ask me anything you want. I'm not saying
But
it's
you're not gonna say anything
No.
specifically about chemical weapons.
There's a sparrow carrying a 1-pound coconut. Are you saying that you dispute the Russian characterization?
No, I'm not going to get into a tit for tat. The Russians will often put out information, and they tend to mischaracterize things sometimes. And so I'm not going to get into, going back and forth with them about what was said in this conversation. Secretary Tillerson is always clear with the Russians about how we feel about certain things. And the Secretary prefers to conduct a lot of his diplomacy in private in those conversations because he believes that we can be most effective that way.
There were
Hey,
some
John.
reports that the White House statement about the Syria chemical weapons attack took some policy experts at the State Department by surprise. Is that true? Was the State Department, fully read in on this?
So the Secretary, as you know, was at the White House yesterday. He met with the President, also a group meeting with the President's national security team, and that's when this conversation was all had about that statement. So they were all informed and aware of that statement in terms of, who exactly that filtered down to at the State Department. I'm not going to get into our internal conversations, but the Secretary was aware of it. Folks here were aware of it, and that's what's important, and that's what matters.
So the sequence of time, the Tillerson-Lavrov call came before the statement
I
made
believe,
by
that's
the
a good
White
question. I
House,
believe the
right?
Secretary's call with Foreign Minister Lavrov was in the morning. I can double check on that and get back with you, but yes, okay. Yeah, it was in the morning.
Might have come as a result of that.
Again,
conversation.
I just don't know, but the call, as I'm getting the nod over here, was in fact in the morning. Sir, hi, how are you? Yes.
There is clearly a difference of opinion, or, I don't know, strong disagreement, whatever you might want to call it, between Russia and the United States over this matter. The Syrians themselves claim that there is no preparation underway for any chemical weapons attack. Russians seems to be agreeing with them.
Wait, hold on. Are we supposed to buy what the Syrians are saying, that there are no chemical weapons
This is not my
preparations
question.
underway? Because in the past, we know that they have killed their own people, which include women and children. So if they say that they're not making any preparations, I'm not certain that we're going to buy that.
Well, there
But
is
go
no
ahead.
agreement on that either.
Pardon me?
There is no agreement on that either. There was no.
That's your question.
I'm sorry?
Just, what's the question?
Go ahead, sir.
I
please.
wanted to ask you something else.
Yes, go right ahead.
I wanted to ask you if there is if there is an intent to follow up on that between
On
Secretary
which? I'm sorry.
on the discussion on Syria and alleged plans for chemical attack between Secretary Tillerson and Minister Lavrov.
Do you mean that when the statement was put out last evening that the United States is concerned about Syria and preparations that we believe are underway for a chemical weapons attack, your question is, will there be additional conversations about that?
Yeah, something like that.
I don't have any additional calls or any information to read out. This is something that the United States government remains very concerned about. I'm just not aware of any subsequent conversations that are scheduled just yet.
Can you, I know you don't want to get into the details, but is there any effort to get the Shannon Ryabkov meetings channel back open again? And is that something
We would
that-
regard that conversation as a very important conversation to be had. You all have heard it here that our relationship with the Russian government is at a low point right now, and we would like to fix that so we can find areas of common interest, such as the fight against ISIS, so that we can find those areas of common interest and work on those fully together. I know we would like to resume those conversations with the Russians about that. I don't have any meetings or any trips to read out about that, but
No, I'm
I'll
just
let you
wondering
know.
if there's something the Secretary talked to Foreign Minister Lavrov about, if there's something that among the menu of agenda that
I
they
know we
had.
talked about a lot of mutual areas of concern regarding rescheduling that meeting. That I just don't know. Sorry. Anything else on Russia right now? Syria, Russia?
Iraq?
Oh, hold on. Russia, Syria? How are you?
Do you guys have any evidence to share with us about this potential preparation for the use of chemical weapons? Because that wasn't actually laid out.
Right, and nor would that be laid out, because that would be considered an intelligence matter. So, as you all are aware, there are a lot of these things that will pop up sometimes that we just can't get into the details about this, but this has obviously gotten the attention of the United States government at the highest level.
So could the activity have perhaps been for some other reason than a chemical weapons attack preparation?
Such as?
Something that they do at the base, or, I mean, is that a possibility?
I would say that that's a hypothetical question. We know from past experience that the Syrian regime has used chemical weapons on its own people. So that obviously remains a very large concern for us in the future.
I just want to make a point of clarification.
Yeah.
When you guys believe that it's in your interests, you do put out what you say is evidence or proof of things that involve intelligence. And it happened from this podium not that long ago with the crematorium that you guys said was being built at the prison.
Yeah.
So it's not a blanket, we never discuss intelligence, right?
Matt Lee, I'm not going to get into that one with you, but this is a very serious and grave matter, and when you have the president involved and his national security team and the secretary involved as well, I'd say that's a serious issue. Okay. Anything else on this? Hi. How are you?
Go ahead, let him go ahead.
I'm sorry.
The preparation. Is it like 24-hour preparation, maybe 48 hours, and then they stand back?
I don't have the answer to that question. The White House may be able to give you more on that, or perhaps the Department of Defense or another agency, but or department rather. But I just can't get into that, and I don't have the answer to that question.
Just to clarify, Mr. Assad was also seen photographed with the top Russian general in Syria within the last 24 hours or so. Do you know if the Russians, or are we aware if the Russians were aware about these preparations as well?
I'm not aware of that.
We don't have any intel saying one way or another.
I just can't get into any intelligence, but I'm not personally aware of that. Okay. Anything else on Russia, Syria? Hold on. Russia, Syria? Okay, who's got it? Sir in the back.
Yeah, so Ambassador Haley said today that they would blame Iran, Russia, and Syria if chemical weapons were, again, what does it mean to blame these countries? How would the U.S. hold them accountable in the event of another strike?
Okay.
Does the U.S. intend on militarily striking Iran or Russia in the event of a chemical weapons attack?
Okay, your third question I can't answer. That's a Department of Defense matter, and then that's also a hypothetical. In terms of the first question, which is why would we look to Syria and Iran?
What does it mean? What does it mean to blame them?
Well, we've seen, all we have to do is look to the past, right? And we have seen as the Syrian regime back in 2015 was on the verge of collapsing. Who came in to help save the Syrian regime? Who came in? Russia came in. And that is exactly why we are today, we meaning the world, in the place that Syria is. Russia came in, helped bolster up Syrian forces, and we have seen the death, the devastation, the destruction that has taken place ever since. So when we say Russia would be held responsible, we believe that they play a role in this as well. They have a lot of influence with the Assad regime, and we have consistently called upon them to use their influence with the Assad regime to stop this kind of activity. John Hein.
Her remarks said any attacks on the Syrian people, will be blamed, on the Assad and the Russians.
Okay.
Why not wait to find out? This is obviously a complex war with a
Right.
number of actors,
Yeah, you're right.
including ISIS. It seemed like a rather unnuanced comment. Wouldn't you find out who exactly, was responsible before blaming?
I can't get too much into what Ambassador Haley said on the Hill today. I don't have all of her comments in front of me, so I just have to refer you to the U.S.-UN for additional clarification on
Well,
what she
she
meant.
actually said that last night in
Okay.
a tweet,
Okay.
as well as saying it again on the
Okay.
Hill. Are you?
Yeah.
The State Department and the United States government would look to find out and make sure it had evidence of who was exactly responsible, right, before issuing a blanket blame for attacks on the Syrian people.
I think her
right?
comments stand for themselves.
Sorry,
Okay.
does that mean that you're not going to answer any questions about what she said on the Hill today? Because I got one.
I know you do. I know you do. Go right ahead. Why don't you ask that question? I'm going to do my level best because I was not aware of, and I know what you're getting at. Well, I'll let you go ahead and ask, and we'll go there.
So
Go right
Ambassador
ahead.
Haley said that it was a matter of U.S. policy to oppose Palestinians for UN positions. And she did this in answering questions about the reason that you guys blocked Salam Fayyad from becoming the representative for Libya. Is that correct? If it's true, it sounds as though it's a discriminatory.
I'm working to get Ambassador Haley's full comments in front of me. I just learned of those comments as I was walking into the briefing room, so didn't have a full amount of time to be able to look into exactly what she said and what was intended by that. So some of this, as you all know, is developing, and when it's developing, I know you want answers right away. I understand that. I'm not always going to be able to give you answers. I'd rather be right than be fast. We will take a close look at her comments. We will work to determine exactly what Ambassador Haley meant, but I can tell you this. Ambassador Haley talked about this back in February when the United States expressed its objection to the appointment of Mr. Fayed as the UN's envoy to Libya. That's what we're talking about. We expressed that, she expressed that again in her Hill testimony, and she's talked about this a lot. She believes that the United Nations, and many believe that the United Nations needs to be reformed, that for far too long the United Nations has been unfairly biased in favor of the Palestinian Authority to the detriment of our allies in Israel. I know that's a concern of hers. She's talked about that a lot. She's talked about reforming the United Nations. But in terms of her comments, I'm just going to need a little bit of time to take a closer look.
Well, let me just add one on there. First of all, I don't understand how this is in any way bias against Israel to appoint a well-known, respected financial guy and diplomat to be the envoy to Libya. I don't see how that has anything to do with bias against Israel at all. But secondly, I mean, she said that until Palestine is a state, that this is the policy. So I'm just curious, do you have, if this is a policy, does it also apply to the Vatican? Because the Palestinians right now have the same status at the UN as the Vatican does. So if you're going to be consistent about this, then you would oppose any representative of the Holy See taking a UN position.
Matt, I'm just not going to get into, again, to characterizing that right now. I understand your question. I understand your concerns. Let me get some additional information. And anybody who has questions, I will do my level best to get you the answers. Okay? Okay. Okay, just a couple more questions. Go ahead. Wait.
Very quickly.
Okay, say
by Israeli press accounts, the meeting between Mr. Kushner and Mahmoud Abbas did not go very well. And they're saying that basically the administration is going to pull out of any ongoing process or potential process. Do you have any comment on that?
I do. This is something that I was involved with and on the phone with, I was not there, but on the phone with over the weekend, hearing from some of the folks who had been traveling with Mr. Kushner and Mr. Greenblatt as well. And that's just false. The president has made Israeli-Palestinian peace one of his top priorities. You know that. We've talked about that. We understand and recognize that this is not going to be a one-shot deal. It's not going to be handled in one meeting or one trip. It is no surprise also that some meetings and conversations may be a little bit more difficult than others. Some will be more challenging. The president has said himself that it is not going to be an easy process, that both sides, the Israelis and the Palestinians, will have to give a bit in order to be able to get to a peaceful arrangement, which we hope to see, but we are not pulling out in any way, shape, or form of this as being one of our priorities. Okay? Cutter. Okay.
Okay, so about a week ago, you said we're left with a simple question. Were the actions of the other countries versus Qatar really about their concerns regarding Qatar's alleged support for terrorism, or were they about the long-simmering grievances between them and the GCC countries? So now that you've seen the list of demands...
I can't believe that was only a week ago. Doesn't that feel like it was a month ago?
I guess.
It does, yeah.
So now that you've seen the list of demands, do you have any more light on what the answer to that question is?
Yeah, the only thing I can say about the exact demands, because I don't want to characterize the demands, but some of them will be difficult for Qatar to incorporate and to try to adhere to. That's as far as I'm going to go in saying that. Nope, I can't. But some of them will be challenging for that country.
So what would you say the goal is of the meetings today?
So the Secretary will have two meetings today. I'm not sure if you're aware of both of them, but he'll meet with the Foreign Minister of Qatar, and then he'll meet with the Foreign Minister of Kuwait. And Kuwait has really done a lot of hard work in terms of trying to bring the nations together so that they can come to some sort of agreement. We continue to call on those countries to work together and work this out. And this process is not over yet. They will be having these conversations. We certainly know for the rest of the week. if not longer than that, and we stand by in order to help facilitate some of these conversations.
There's not a set goal, a specific goal for the meetings today, especially with Qatar, like to finalize a response or something like that?
Not that I am aware of. This meeting starts in 20-some minutes, and so I'm going to have to head up there so I can go into that bilateral meeting. But if there's something that I can share with you, I certainly will.
I get that you don't want to characterize the demands as, but when you say that you realize that some of them will be difficult for Qatar to meet, that implies that you think that they should meet them.
I don't think so.
No?
No.
So you think that there's a way, there's some kind of middle ground, there's room for negotiation, not with you guys, but between the parties, so that maybe some or parts of some are completed and maybe other parts are not?
These nations are going to have to work out their disagreements. I mean, we've talked about how a lot of these are long simmering tensions. We believe that they're going to have to work them out. They're best worked out with the countries themselves. We are pleased and happy that Kuwait has stepped in to help be a mediator of sorts, and we're happy to stand by and assist as we can, but we still feel that they can work them out themselves.
But you don't necessarily think that they have to be, all of them have to be met as was delivered in that
Matt,
statement.
that's for the countries to work out. That's not for me to say, and I don't know that that's for the State Department to weigh in at that level, because ultimately these parties have to live with the decisions and the agreements that they make. Okay, last question. Lori?
Yesterday, Iraqi Prime Minister Abadi announced that ISIS defeat was close at hand. And so what are your plans? How is the liberation of Mosul, once it's liberated, which will be soon, how is that going to change what you're doing in Iraq? What are your plans for the future of that area?
Well, they wouldn't be our plans for the future of the area. It would be the Iraqi government's plans. There's a government of Iraq, so the government of Iraq can decide how they want to govern themselves and what will take place in certainly in certain areas. Our focus right now is on the liberation of Mosul. The Iraqi Prime Minister talked about how he believes that this will be done sooner rather than later. I'm not going to characterize a timeline. Our U.S. forces and coalition partners and the Iraqi government are out there hard at work to try to get ISIS out of the remaining parts of Mosul. There's a lot of work left to be done. We've also had some successes, and when I say we, I mean the Iraqis, coalition, and the United States government, in bringing a lot of people back to Mosul in the safer parts where we've gotten ISIS out, and now some of those people have been able to come back in. I think the latest numbers are somewhere around 300,000, but Matt can Matt can probably chime in better on those numbers. The priorities in those areas, working with the government of Iraq to do demining, that is one of the major priorities that the U.S. government is involved with as our coalition partners, to bring water, food, electricity. Some schools are back now in session in eastern Mosul. We're not talking, in the tougher parts where ISIS is really dug in western Mosul, but in eastern Mosul. And that's really a success story as we see it, because if you have children who are able to go back to school right now, not long after ISIS was really dug into that area, that is a success and a real testament to the hard work that the Iraqis and our coalition partners have done as well.
Do you have any suggestions for political changes in the area, political reform?
We wouldn't have any, I don't think we would have any suggestions for that. There's a government of Iraq, and the government of Iraq can best decide. Okay. All right, last question.
One more on Clay.
Is Ambassador Coppage staying in her role, and is that an important role that needs to be filled at this department? You've got 67 odd special envoys and representatives that this department, or this administration in particular, has said needs to be whittled down substantially, if not entirely eliminated. She got a job next month, and if so, and if not, is somebody else going to fill that role?
I don't know the answer to that. Ambassador Coppage and I talked, spent some time together last week and spent some time together today, and our focus was really solely on the TIP report and getting that out and getting the information out. So I didn't have a chance to ask her what her career plans are, but if I can find out for you and let you know, I certainly will. But she did a terrific job in putting this together.
Is it an important role to fill at this department, even if it's not her?
The TIP report has been ongoing for, what is it, how many, you all have been covering the State Department for a long time, 18 years, 18 years? 17 years, there we go. So I would see that as an important matter, and I'll just leave it at that. Okay, last question.
Senator Corker sent a letter yesterday to Secretary Tillerson threatening to block future arms sales to Gulf nations. How does that affect the negotiation process? Does it help or hurt?
I wouldn't characterize it either way. We're aware of that letter. That letter came here into the department, and there's a lot that's going to happen this week, I think. There are a lot of conversations left to be had. About to step into one right now, so I just don't want to get ahead of some of those conversations. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks. Peter, Gage, you want to ask a question? You guys have a question? All right, my boys don't have a question. It's the first time they're speechless. Thank you, everybody. We'll see you again on Thursday. Looking forward to it.